And the opposition says reforms to the safeguard mechanisms will only worsen already rocketing power prices. Joining us live for more on this is Shadow Climate Change and Energy Minister Ted O'Brien. Ted O'Brien, thank you for your time. Why are the reforms, in your view, too drastic?
Thanks very much also for your time. Look, these reforms are bad news. If you go back to when Julia Gillard introduced her carbon tax, they were looking at pricing carbon at $23 a tonne. Now Anthony Albanese has his own version of the carbon tax, but he's pricing it 3 times higher, at $75 a tonne. That's over 3 times. By 2030, it'll be $100 a tonne. Now, I think everybody knows across Australia that businesses are on their knees, and so too are households. The last thing they need is a new tax, and that's precisely what this is. It comes at a time when people can less afford it, but Labor wants to plough ahead. I believe it is reckless, and it will be a tax ultimately on households. There'll be a tax on jobs and certainly a tax on regional Australia.
Well, the government says that this $75 cap actually will provide stability for companies, ensuring that we're still competitive. Is that not a fair point?
No, it's not a fair point at all. In fact, it does the opposite. The government's very good at saying one thing and delivering another, and this is yet another case. What the government is saying to these businesses is they have to reduce their emissions by 5% a year. Now, that is the highest demand of any government in the world. That's what the Labor government are insisting. And if you can't do it, then you will be taxed. You will have to pay a credit scheme. Now, that'll end up being a price around about $75 per tonne for the government carbon credit units. Now, this is a carbon tax. That's all it is. But it's a carbon tax that's 3 times the size of that which Julia Gillard introduced. And Australians cannot handle that right now.
Well, it's interesting because industry groups are largely welcoming the changes. Isn't it important to make sure we are on track in achieving net zero by 2050?
There are different ways of decarbonising the Australian economy, but the name of the game has to be decarbonising, not decapitating the Australian economy, and that's what this does. What we've seen with the Albanese Labor Government is they're taking the country down the wrong path to decarbonising. Now, we've seen that. We've seen it every single time you open up your power bill. And you see that your prices are going up. Businesses are feeling the same thing. That is a direct result of the Albanese Labor Government's policies. This is going to have the same effect. Businesses will not be able to reduce emissions as the government is insisting. They will have to pay a tax that will be passed on to consumers. That's the game plan. It is not the way you run an orderly, balanced decarbonisation of an economy. They're going about it the wrong way. Businesses are going to be in pain, and this will hurt people. It's one thing to reduce emissions. It's another thing to